You're listening to Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Olivia's Book Club, and I'm your host, Olivia Fierro, and I cannot believe that we are already to Thanksgiving week. What? So, what are we going to do? We're going to express a little gratitude for the books that have gotten us to escape and go other places and be in other people's shoes and lives and adventures over the course of the year, thinking about some of the favorites. So, to bring in perspective, I have a reader friend joining me. Whitney Clark is the host of Good Morning Arizona on Saturdays and Sundays, and one of our team members here during the week on the morning show who we love, who also is a nerd like me and reads constantly.
Yes, I am one of those people. We were talking to the engineer before this, Lorraine, our engineer. Just stop us if we get a little nerdy.
Yes.
With the book talk, because I could go on for a long time.
Lorraine's like, okay, stop. Let's wrap this up. Short and sweet. It was great. Okay, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Yes. Okay, so tell me about, first of all, Whitney, when you became a reader, like when it really became a huge part of your life, and also like when in the course of your day, because you're on a wild schedule, when are you squeezing in these books?
So I was one of those little kids that kind of always had a book. Like I was a kid, my mom, my parents, I would always ask them to take me to Borders. Remember when we went to Borders bookstores? Borders, the library, I loved reading as a kid. Probably high school, college, it dropped off a little bit. And then
because of boys?
Yes, all the boys. You know who you are. Yeah. I just, you're in school, you're doing a lot. Yeah. And then as an adult, I would read kind of like on vacation. If I was going on a trip, I would have my Kindle. And then I think when the pandemic really started and we were at home, that is when I really picked it up again as like a more every single day kind of hobby.
Yeah.
So I usually read when I'm off, when I wake up in the morning, those quiet hours in the beginning of the day, which I absolutely love. When I go home at night, right before bed, just kind of whenever I can. I always tell people, like, try to read like a little kid. Bring a book everywhere and just read whenever you get like a spare moment.
Well, and that's the thing. Sometimes you think your day is busy or you think you have something planned or something's going, and then you're stuck waiting, and there's nothing worse than knowing, oh, I'm in the middle of this book and it's sitting on my nightstand, and why did I not put it in my tote bag? I'm carrying everything else with me anyway.
That is exactly how I feel. So I did start getting into audiobooks, which has been nice because then if you are somewhere, you can just tune in, if you have your headphones.
Yes. Okay, so I'm very excited to hear what your favorites are as you're looking over the year. Now, do you do Goodreads, by the way?
I have an account and I do not update it. Okay. I need to get on it. I know a couple people on it. I usually will just post on my Instagram story things that I like. And I'm like, people are probably scrolling through this like, we don't care about what you're reading. But then I do get like messages from people like, hey, I took a screenshot of this. It looks really good. So it is nice to have those sort of like Instagram conversations.
Yes.
With the book lovers.
It's always great to have a recommendation from somebody who and especially as you start to learn if you have books in common and you enjoy sort of the same type of read. Yeah. So in general, Whitney, what would be your go-to genre if like the world had weird rules and we're like, you can only read this type of book for the rest of your life?
I mean, I have to say that I'm like a sucker for, it would be a toss-up between like any kind of romantic kind of comedy or historical fiction.
Nice.
I really like historical fiction.
I do too, yeah.
And I liked what you said in your intro about escapism, because that's how I view reading. It's just an escape. I think people can get like judged by certain books they read, but as long as you're enjoying it and you love it, I mean, that's all that matters. Just read whatever you like.
That shirtless guy on the cover, it doesn't mean that it's not great literature, or at least very well written.
Right. Yeah.
The hunky torso on the cover, I mean, it's still very deep. There's a lot of layers to all the books out there. But whatever you enjoy, it's a wonderful way to spend your time.
Yes.
Okay, so do you have an idea, since you don't do the Goodreads, do you have an idea of how many books you've read so far this year?
So I am a little bit of a dork with that too.
I
keep a journal, like a handwritten journal.
I love this about you.
Because I started like forgetting what I would read. And so last year, my goal was to read 52 books, and I did it, and I wrote it all down in my little journal. And then this year, I think I'm at 44, 45. I wanted to get to 60 by the end of the year, which I think I'll get. So,
awesome.
It does help. And then once I actually write it down, then I remember kind of what I've read. And then I put it on my Instagram and save it, and then can go back and look too.
Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than picking up, especially I do a lot of thrillers, and there's always like these domestic thrillers, a husband and wife in a suburban neighborhood. And then I'm like, this sounds familiar to me. And I'm like, I think I read this like 7 years ago.
I've literally checked things out from the library and been like, got it home and been like, I've read this already.
Yeah. So it's nice to keep track. And that's the main reason that I do the Goodreads, just so I can be like, okay, wait, where is it?
So I have the old school Goodreads.
Okay, yes, you do.
In my little journal.
The even better Goodreads. It's her own journal. Okay, so you came up with a list of 5 books that stood out to you the most of your favorites that you would recommend to any and all.
Yes, and it was difficult, as you know, to come up with favorites.
So hard.
But for a lot of different reasons, these were the ones that I chose. This is in no particular order. Yes. This is just kind of what I thought of. So Carrie Soto is back. Taylor Jenkins Reid.
Okay.
This was one of her, it's not a series, but they have sort of the same character tied together in 4 of the books.
I love that.
The Paris Library, which was historical fiction, which was wonderful.
Yes.
It was about the librarians at the American Library in Paris who protected books during World War II. They helped get books out to soldiers and other people in the community, and so that was very interesting.
So one thing that I have that in my queue as wanting to read, and I love historical fiction as well, and I've heard nothing but amazing things about this book. It seemed like there were so many World War II era books about women like doing brave things that I was like, wait, can I do another woman doing brave things during World War II?
And I know exactly how you feel, because I almost didn't want to read it because I was like, but I actually went to Paris. I was going to Paris and I visited the library, so I wanted to read it before I went.
Cool.
And it also goes, it's like at present day, and then it goes back in time, so it's a little different, and then it's like not just solely during World War II. But I totally get what you mean. It's kind of like after a while you're kind of like,
and I know it's always
thing.
Just luck that a lot of these books will come out in the same and there's a zillion stories to be told from that time period, but I think that's why I hesitated on it, because I thought about it for the book club, but I do want to read that. It's a compelling story.
I think if you love libraries and you love books, it's absolutely check it out for sure. Okay, so then Crying in H Mart, which
I read this as well.
This was a memoir that came out, I think, last year. It was one of those ones that I saw everywhere and didn't pick it up until this year. And it took me a while to read, because the way that she describes her grief was like so heartbreaking and just real that it was, for anyone that's lost somebody, which we all have, it was difficult to hear, but probably the best, most beautiful description I've ever heard of what it's like to lose somebody. Which I thought was really great. And then the way she explains the food. I mean, my mouth was literally watering the whole time. Yeah,
and it's stuff I wasn't familiar with, and it's very interesting. Like, it really makes you want to go and explore Asia and at least go to an H Mart and ask somebody in the know what you should be buying.
And food was such a common thing and such an important thing for her mom and her family, and so that was really special, and that was so good. That was definitely one of the best memoirs I think I've probably read the whole year.
Yeah, and she is, as she mentions in the book, the lead singer of a band, right? And they are going to be here in Arizona at the Innings Festival, by the way.
Oh my God, you got to get her to come.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah, Michelle.
Yeah, Michelle.
You're listening.
Yeah, because I was left wondering. I think at the end, you're really left wondering what happens with her and her father. And I saw on some interviews, I think that they had really not resolve their relationship.
And then also too, like, her and her husband had kind of gotten married really quickly, but they're still married. Yeah. Which is nice to hear, because in the book you're like, oh, they're going to make it, because it was very rushed, because she wanted to be with her mom. So
yeah.
But so yeah.
In that time when you're grieving, it's like you're not supposed to make huge decisions. Yeah. But she did. Yeah, that's an excellent book too.
It was very special that they got to have that. So that was really good. And then I also liked One Italian Summer, which you
love it.
That was a book club.
We did a book club book with that, and we actually. So I guess, Whitney, when you were still ignoring my book club and you're working at night. No, I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? Rebecca Searle actually joined us on the Zoom.
I did see that.
So she was on this podcast. Which, if you're interested in this book, there's a conversation with the two of us, but no spoilers of the book. But then she joined us for that Zoom to talk all about the book. She is really fun, and I just loved her, and I love the fact that she and her mom had gone on a trip to Rome and met up with her mom's boyfriend from high school or something, and that was part of what inspired the story. I thought the story was so clever.
It was. I went into it thinking it was going to be like a rom-com.
Yeah.
But it was more of a mother-daughter story.
Yes. Oh, it's a mother-daughter love story.
I mean, Italy is the most like beautiful place in the world, I'm convinced. And the way she described it, for months, all I wanted was like pasta with like a lemon sauce, because she just talked about food. Again, like crying in H Mart in just such a beautiful way. And then I think, I don't have children, but, as a kid, you kind of think adults and parents have everything figured out. It's like they know what to do. And I think it was interesting to see her learn about her mom in a way that she had never experienced before. And it's like adults don't have everything figured out. Her mom, went through something when she was younger, and so without giving too much away. But I loved that about the book.
I really thought it was so clever too. It is. It's really a daughter's love story for her mother, and the exploration of her beyond the one facet of being my mom, but being a whole person, and the way that she describes Italy, and she's in Positano specifically, is just so, you are dying to be there, feeling for a little moment like you're there. The smells, the feel of the sun, the food, the everything.
I actually texted one of my girlfriends, because I've been to Italy, but not that part of Italy, and I was like, we've been talking about going on a trip. I'm like, let's please go. And I was like, to my boyfriend, I'm really sorry, but you're not invited on this girls trip. But
it's the most beautiful area ever. And then the other book that is also there, well, it takes you to Capri, is the Kevin Kwan series. It's
counterfeit.
China Rich Girlfriend, what was the one that it started it?
Crazy Rich Asians.
Crazy Rich Asians. The most recent one, the last one, so the third of the series, goes. They follow a wedding, and it's in Capri, and it makes you want to go there and be doing all this stuff so badly too. So you'd have to read that before your trip as well. Okay, did you have one more?
And then I liked Atlas of the Heart by Brene Brown.
Brene Brown, I love her.
I am not into like self-help sort of books.
Yes.
This wasn't really like a self-help book to me. I just try to explain it as like an encyclopedia of every emotion you could ever possibly feel. And so the whole time reading it, I kept thinking like, oh yeah, I know that feeling. Like I know that. Like I'd never been able to articulate maybe an emotion I'd felt in a certain moment, and she does a beautiful job of touching on anything you could think of that you've ever felt in your life.
She's so amazing.
Yeah,
and I, in general, try to reject a lot of the self-help stuff. But there are certain people who just hit it, and everything they say resonates. And what I love about her is that she's a scientist and a researcher, and also like a human who shares her own personal perspective on everything. So there's legitimacy and depth to everything that she says. It's not just like on a whim that she's telling you that, people are feeling this because of this. She's researching it, and she's studying it, and she knows. And just the way that she's able to like tap into capturing, I think, the way that people feel, and when they feel shame or they're making decisions that they regret. She is an amazing voice.
Yeah, she has that TED Talk that's super famous. That I think I've watched it once, and then Atlas of the Heart. If you're not into reading, there's a series on HBO.
Yes, it's on HBO Max.
I did watch the first sort of episode, and I was like in tears because they show movie clips, and that's like a huge part of kind of showing people like different emotions and stuff like that. So,
yeah, that was really well done, I thought. And she's a very engaging public speaker, and she's just got everything about her I just absolutely love.
Yeah, and she's very vulnerable with her own story and talking about herself, but isn't like preachy and that you're feeling like you're being talked down to. And like when I posted it on my Instagram, somebody messaged me and was like, I got this as a gift, but I don't normally like these types of books. I was like, it's not really like those types of books, whatever you're referring to.
No, it's not. And it's something that I think everybody, I kind of have it out as a coffee table book. I feel like it's something that everybody would want to flip through. And actually, I got it as a gift from my stepdaughter Jessica, so thank you, Jessica, because I was like, oh, I've been wanting this, oh my gosh.
I did get it from the library. I think I waited a long time, but it is one of the books that I would like to go buy now, because it would be nice to just kind of have around, to flip through. And even when I was going to talk to you about this today, I was like, I can't even remember anything specific about the book. You know what I mean? Because it was months ago, but I just remember the overall feeling that I got. But that's definitely one to buy.
It is a good revelation from you also that you are a borrower rather than a buyer, which is the responsible way to be.
Yeah, I try to go, like, I would say probably half my books are library books. I have like 8 library books right now. And, they don't charge late fees. Not that my books would be late. So Phoenix Public Library. I'm very responsible. But you can put holds on stuff. Sometimes with new books, it can be hard to actually, it'll take a long time.
Long
so
waiting
if it's something
list.
new, like the Carrie Soto book, I went out and bought it because I was like, I don't want to wait a couple weeks. But the library, I feel like I'm a huge, huge advocate for the library system. I mean, my favorite thing is that when you check out, they'll tell you how much money you saved. So you'll be like, I saved $80.
Wow.
Because I checked out library books.
That is so cool. And it's keeping the tradition up from when you were a kid because that was the most fun place to go.
And then I do like Changing Hands. They have really good stuff, and they'll have used books sometimes too.
So circling back to the first book that you mentioned, which was, you're not putting them in any order, but these were your... Did we already see all our 5?
I think I said all of them.
Okay. The Carrie Soto book. So this was the one that was about the tennis player.
Yes.
And so I don't know, and I love Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I absolutely rushed to read this. This was my least favorite one of her books.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know if this is the curse of when you love somebody so much that your expectation, and I think this is like the kind of person I am. My expectations are always unrealistic for all things.
Yeah, of course.
So it's like I was expecting, I don't know. And
I know what you mean.
It was so much tennis.
Yes. So I will preface, I should have prefaced it with saying that I grew up playing tennis. My family had a tennis club. My dad was a tennis instructor.
What?
So
you should have said that.
So I grew up taking lessons, tennis lessons, and I grew up having my grandma, my dad constantly watching tennis, which of course as a kid I thought was incredibly boring. And I don't make it a habit to really watch tennis now, but I started this book the same week that Serena Williams was retiring.
Yes.
So there were a lot of kind of
timing was perfect. Yeah.
Between Carrie Soto, Serena Williams. So I think that was also part of it, is that I all of a sudden got really like hyped up on tennis again.
Ooh. So yes. Okay, I get it.
And it's funny because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to say this is one of my favorites. And I looked on Twitter and everyone was talking about how the book was so boring. And I'm like, okay, I could see if you don't like tennis, if you're not into it, I could see where it would be something that would be a little bit of like maybe not your favorite or maybe the least favorite of the 4.
Yes, exactly.
Of her books. But I just really liked Carrie Soto because she got called names. I mean, she was very competitive. She wasn't like maybe... I hate to use this word, but like likable. Like people, she was like kind of slammed in the media. But I think that she just loved the sport and, was treated differently than maybe a man would have been treated.
Oh, definitely.
And so that was kind of frustrating watching her just trying to play the sport she loved when she was sort of maybe getting treated like a little bit differently. And it also took place kind of like the 70s. So that was also a different time period of the sport as well.
Liked the commentary on women in sports in general because of and we've seen this play out with the Williams sisters, and they've talked about it plenty about the expectations. You're not supposed to be so aggressive. Well, of course you got to be aggressive, otherwise you wouldn't be a champion that everybody around the world knows your name and your sport, right? If you're not pissed off when you lose, you would never be there. And so the way that they're supposed to behave versus the expectations on the male athletes, and then also the elevation of women in their sports just because of the way that they look. Yeah. And so that was kind of touched on. It's something that Carrie has to deal with and kind of just disregard and forge ahead. And so I liked the character a lot. Yeah. I really did, and the dynamic with her father, and it certainly felt like it was inspired by Serena Williams and Venus and their father. But it was just in the coaching, so much tennis, so much strategy, so much tennis, scoring tennis, and also a lot of tennis.
And if you don't know, like I wish I could. I feel like I know the scoring in tennis. It's like love. It's 40 up or whatever the scoring is. Something I learned as a kid, but don't even ask me to try to explain it to you because I can't explain it to you.
Well, and that's the problem. And my husband loves tennis. He grew up playing tennis. My in-laws play tennis, and so for 15 years I have been watching tennis, and I do enjoy. There's certain players I love to watch. Others I won't watch at all. I don't care at all, but I still don't understand the scoring. So I'm like 15 years in, and I guess it's just that part is a lost cause. But
it was a lot of tennis, and so it's just I think all the factors of the Serena Williams and my family,
that was perfect
and
timing.
that's sort of for me. And I will say though that her those, Malibu Rising, Daisy Jones and the Six, the Evelyn Hugo book, and that one. If anyone ever asks me for a recommendation, I always suggest Evelyn Hugo because
so
that was
good.
just one of my favorite books last year.
Phenomenal.
And I read them completely out of order. Not like you need to read them in order, but just something about her books and the characters. Those are ones that I'll read in like 2 days.
Oh,
3 days.
yeah. And you can't wait. That's like you can't wait on the list.
No.
Like you have to know right away.
Do you have one of hers? Have you read all of those? Is there one that
I have read all of those, yes. So Carrie said it would be number 4. Number 3 would be Malibu Rising.
Okay, yeah.
Which I enjoyed very much, but I don't know. I didn't have as much of an emotional connection to the family. And then it's really a tie for me because I loved Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. We read that as a book club, like right at this kind of start of the pandemic, and it was fantastic. But I loved Daisy Jones so much. I found myself crying at the end of Daisy Jones, which I don't know that a lot of people were crying over it at the end. I just thought it was so creative. The inventive way that she's telling the story as if you're watching like a behind the music. Yeah. And I felt so connected to them. And I knew that it was a work of fiction, yet I kept finding myself Googling Daisy Jones and the real. And I was like, hey, it's a character. Hello. Somebody doesn't understand. So it was that real to me. And it was amazing.
I normally, for whatever reason, don't love books that take place in the 60s. I can't really explain why I feel that way. It's just not my favorite, I guess, time period for books. But that one I did really enjoy, and the way she wrote it, like you said, was so interesting. It was like it was like an interview.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a show.
It's going to be a show, and I think it's going to be soon because they've already wrapped production.
Okay.
And Daisy is played by the granddaughter of Elvis Presley.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yes. And I saw some of the pictures of them all on set, and they looked exactly like I pictured.
I saw like a little bit of a trailer, and I think it's a Reese Witherspoon production.
Yes.
Which is good because Reese has
gonna be
her
great.
book club, so she's going to hopefully do us
for
right.
sure. Oh, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about that. The other thing, a lot of things about books is when they hit you.
Yes.
Right? So sometimes you're not in the mood for something. Sometimes it hits you in the exact moment when you needed to read that story. Or you've read another book that was too similar and you're comparing too closely and the other one might have been better or whatever. So you had the perfect setup for the tennis story. I had the worst setup because I had also just read Leanne Moriarty's When Apples Fall.
Oh, that was I did not like that.
It was so boring.
It was so bad.
I
almost feel bad for saying that.
I
because
do
I am
too.
a fan of her.
I am a huge fan of hers.
I almost didn't finish that book.
I almost didn't finish it as well, but I kept telling myself, Olivia, surely this book's going to pay off at the end. Don't quit now because it's Leanne Moriarty. And when it was over, I was like, well, I could have quit at any point.
Well, and it was so long.
It was really long.
It was over 400 pages, which I have no problem with a book over 400 pages.
When something happens.
But it was like the whole time I was waiting, and there was nothing that I didn't like love the character. I wasn't all of them were just kind of annoying, and I was not a fan.
Right. And that was also tennis, and also a lot of nothing happening. So then I think I went really closely from that book to this, and so I was like, I'm all tennised out, you know. So that was my fault, for planning in the wrong way.
Which is, I mean, her books are normally like, isn't she Big Little Lies?
Oh yeah,
which I saw the show, but I didn't read the book. But the show was amazing.
Funny family story is that when I read that book when it first came out, and I was like, whoa, this book is unbelievable. Yeah. My brother and sister-in-law are both television writers. And so she does mostly, kind of women's stories. And I said, you have to read this book. This should be made into a television show. It is so unbelievable. You are going to love it. And she's like, okay, yeah, I'll look at it. She never read it. And then all of a sudden, I see that Reese Witherspoon opening her production studio with Big Little Lies, all-star cast, whatever. And she sends me a note saying, I will never ignore your recommendations again.
Oh, my God.
So, Liz Craft.
That was definitely one of the best HBO series.
So good. So good. Okay, so I was in a scramble this morning because I have such a hard time thinking about what my favorites are.
It's hard.
It's really hard. And I forgot to check where I'm at in terms of my reading list. So I'll take a quick peek at my Goodreads.
You use Goodreads.
I use Goodreads to keep track of of my books and like what I'm reading and,
Right.
and when and how many what my goal is. And then you get to set your goal in there. So let's see, what is my reading challenge for the year? I think I was going for 52 as well, at least to have a book. Oh, I was only going for 48, so I was trying to be easy on myself. I am at 66.
Wow, look at you go.
That's exciting, except I'm actually at 67 because I forgot to put in my most recent one, which was We Are the Light by Matthew Quick, which made my list. So really quickly, I'll just mention a couple of books that are some of my favorites. I grabbed some off of my shelf at home, but then I realized that lately I've been doing some Kindle combos, and I gotta say that I really, 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 really loved and will be thinking about for a long time Stephen King's Fairy Tale.
Okay, I've never read a Stephen King book before.
This is not like any Stephen King book. This is literally a modern take. I think it's set in the 80s, actually. Okay. Take on a fairy tale, like actually on Jack and the Beanstalk.
Interesting.
And so it's a young guy. He's a high school athlete who interacts with a neighbor who's like a grumpy neighbor who nobody speaks to in this house that kids grow up in the neighborhood saying is haunted and spooky. And he helps him when he's fallen and needs assistance. And it just starts this story that literally takes you through like a lot of the, traditional fairy tale storylines into another universe. That's kind of
so
thing.
Interesting.
And it's just an amazing story, and it's extremely long.
Yeah, I was going to ask because I feel like his books tend to be very long.
It's very, very, very long. But it is, and I would also say the audio is excellent. The guy's voice is just dreamy, and the character is so lovable, and he's gone through a real tragedy because he's lost his mom as a child. And so there's just all of this heart to it and all of this. It's just, I thought it was very magical, which is, but it stayed with me, and I thought it was an incredible book.
So with a book that's that long, do you read multiple books at a time, or are you strictly only one book? Some people are can only handle one thing at a time.
Yeah, I am usually doing one audiobook and one reading book at the same time.
Yeah.
So this one I did on audio.
Okay.
And it was I want to say it's like 24 hours on audio. Which is the average book is maybe 10 hours.
Are you at one? Do you
I do it at
bump
the regular speed at
okay.
1. Mm-hmm.
I can do sometimes 1.5, but maybe not in the morning. My brain's not fully working if it's a little fast. But.
Yeah, this I really enjoyed it, and I felt it was worth the time. But if I was in a rush or something, don't pick it for your book club because nobody's got that 24 hours to spare, and I don't know how long. Okay, and then the other one that I just also listened to on audio, and it came out just this month in November, is Matthew Quick, who wrote Silver Linings Playlist. Okay. His new one is called We Are the Light. And it is it's really heavy but really beautiful, and it's very much about grief, and it's set after a tragic mass shooting in a movie theater in a small town in Pennsylvania. So it's at the Majestic Theater in Majestic, Pennsylvania. And the entire book is told in the form of letters that he is writing to his analyst. Mm-hmm. And these are unreturned letters. And it's I thought that the way that he told this story, the way that you feel everything that he is feeling, the way that you can feel him in the highs and the lows, the spiraling out of control, the pain, the healing, all of it, it was just beautiful. You're so lost up in it, it kind of took me a minute to realize, oh, wow, we have not heard any other narrator. There's no other perspective. This is just the letters.
Wow.
And so it's sad, but I think that especially if somebody has dealt with really losing somebody that they love, I think it would be kind of a beautiful, painful but beautiful book that's worthwhile.
I think sometimes whether it's nonfiction or fiction, every book has human elements that are very real. So even if it's not a memoir or something, there's always things you can get out of it. Those real human experiences that just speak to so many people.
Yeah, I loved this. I have 2 memoirs that really stood out to me. And so a memoir I really love to do if you can on audio, if it's the narrator saying their own story, then it really makes sense to me. So did you read I'm Glad My Mom Died?
I did. I listened to it.
Yeah.
And that is what got me started on audiobooks.
Yes.
Because it was her voice telling her story that was very difficult to hear at some points.
Yes, very.
But
Jeanette McCurdy.
I agree that that's one to listen to on an audiobook.
Yeah, this book had me spinning.
Me too. I mean, I was a little bit past the age of iCarly.
Yeah, I didn't know who she was. So that was one thing I was completely dismissive of it because I'm like, oh, that's not my age. I don't know who she is. And I've been telling all of my friends, it does not matter that we don't know who she is. This story is I thought it was so important, especially like as a mom, what we do to our kids when we project these expectations and when we kind of force things that we feel are right for somebody else when they're a completely separate human from us. It's like a whoa. It kind of gave everybody like a step back.
Yeah, and I didn't know much about really her. I knew about the show iCarly, and then I was talking to my sister about it, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, she was like the funniest person on the show. She was so funny. She was great at comedy, but reading the book and never having seen it, you would have never known that because of the way she talked about it. And I think, being a child star would be incredibly difficult, and I think everyone has these like bright and shiny sort of lives on social media, on TV and magazines, and to hear what she went through really behind the scenes was just like heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, she's a very gifted writer, for that not being her chief profession, like wow. And then another one also from an actress, and so of course the audio is incredible, was Viola Davis's memoir, which is titled Finding Me. Okay. And oh my gosh, I mean, it is, talk about somebody who has like overcome the most incredible odds and has the most incredible life story. I mean, she is so strong and resilient and just went through so much. But it is a hard listen because of what she experiences, and it's a lot of like trigger topics. I mean, there's sexual assault and there's incredible intense poverty and alcoholism and strong racism. And so it starts out out of the gate with her retelling what kids would scream at her, chasing her home from school, that this was like a ritual every day, like basically running for your life. Because people just wanted to attack her for the color of her skin and for being poor and all of this. It's a remarkable story, and it just, you'll never look at that person the same again because it's so incredible what it takes to get from there to where she is.
I have this on hold at the library. I have the audiobook. I specifically picked the audiobook for this as well because I heard the audiobook was fantastic. So hopefully I'll get it in 2023 because there was very popular. I think there were like 160, 200 people that had it on hold, which is great to know that so many people are using the library system and obviously wanting to listen to it. So.
Yeah, it was really, really a powerful book. And then I'll just mention really quickly, I brought a stack off of my shelf. So you read Verity.
I did read Verity.
So now I realize that there's an additional chapter on a special edition that's a hardcover, and I need to figure out how to get that without having to get another copy of this book.
I didn't know that either.
So,
I think I read I have a Kindle version.
Wow. So apparently it offers a little clarity as to what really happened, because you know how you're left Verity with a kind of a what happened, did she, didn't she sort of thing.
This was very, I have very mixed feelings about Colleen Hoover books, and I think this was one that is not like any of her other.
No, completely different from her.
It's so different that it's like people that like don't like her other books, I'm like, well, this one is not at all like the other
this
ones.
is a psychological thriller, and it is crazy. Also, and she had joined us on the podcast. So these are actually all authors that we've had on the podcast, which so then they get an extra special point in my heart. Nora McInerney we just talked to for Bad Vibes Only, which is this collection of essays. It is so funny. I think it is it's funny. It gives you all the feels. I think it's a great gift for anybody because the essays are short and there's something in here for everybody that's relatable, about childhood stories, about just like awkwardness, and she's just has a really unique voice, and she is everything she says and the way she sees the world is really humorous and funny.
Christmas is around the corner.
Christmas is a-coming.
Just say it.
Look Closer by David Ellis. I had never read him before. He has written in collaboration with James Patterson a bunch. This book was such a mind bleep. I was like, I'm on it. I'm figuring this out. No, I'm not. Every 3 pages, I'm like, what? I love a twisty thriller, and I would say this is the twistiest thriller that I read all year.
That's good to hear, because kind of what you said earlier is that after a while, it's like they all blend together.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's always a husband and a wife situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's always nice to read something that is really unpredictable.
I was like, this is the head blown off emoji, because this was so good. And my my husband felt the same way about it. He just kept walking in going, oh my God. Oh my God. I'm like, I know, right? Keep going. Lessons in Chemistry, Bonnie Garmis. I know it's on a lot of people's favorites of the year.
This was really good. This was another one that was almost a little frustrating to hear how she was treated as a female scientist.
Yes.
I think every woman reading this was so mad for her,
right.
But I loved that. It was just all the characters were very quirky and lovable, and I liked this one a lot too.
So good. LA Weather, which is hopefully being adapted into a television show. That was Maria was in the talks when she talked to us when this book first came out. It's now in paperback, by the way. And I think because I grew up in Los Angeles, this hit home for me. It's a Latino family, successful, 3 daughters who are kind of hotshots in their industries, and it's sort of dissecting though all of the family dysfunction as even though they're adults and they don't need their parents, the mom and dad have announced that they're getting a divorce, and everything starts to fall apart. And so it goes through. I thought her storytelling was really clever because it goes through the months of the year and talks about how the father becomes obsessed with the Weather Channel. So everything is framed by telling you how the weather is, and if the Santa Ana winds are stirring a lot, and if it's fire season, and it sort of lends this sort of intense, very palpable, feeling to it. That if you've spent a lot of time there, it resonates. Yeah, definitely.
I have this on my coffee table, and I haven't read it yet. And I also grew up in Southern California, so I was kind of like, oh, fire season is so stressful. I was like, I don't know if I even really want to read this, but I'm glad to hear that there's a lot, obviously, to it. Okay.
And there's something super scary that happens that opens up the book, but that's not the tone of the book. Okay. So I almost got scared off of it at the very beginning as well, but I'm glad that I read it. And then if you like thrillers, The Golden Couple was one of my most enjoyable books, I would say, of this year. I've been recommending it to a lot of girlfriends just because it's that young, good-looking married couple going through a little bump in the marriage. They're seeking counseling, and this counselor is unlike anybody else. And so the story is told back and forth between the two women's perspective, the therapist and the patient, the one half of the golden couple. And the voices are so distinctive, and I mean, you immediately know who's talking the second you read, the first phrase. And it's I really enjoyed it.
And
so
is
it's
it
a fun,
2 authors?
It's 2 authors. Okay. They write together now.
Interesting.
Yeah. So one had already been a novelist. The other one, so I'm gonna mess up which was which. But I think Greer Hendricks had already been writing many books, and Sarah Pekkanen was her editor.
Okay.
And then they hit it off. They started to collaborate, and now they've been writing bestsellers together.
I think it's so interesting. There's another Christina Lauren.
Yes.
Which I didn't know was 2 people until I looked at the end. I was like, oh, Christina Lauren is not just one
also
woman.
Have been here on the podcast.
Yeah.
They are so fun.
Yeah. I'm the one of the books, The Soulmate Equation, I think is what it's called. Nicole Kreitz, who also works here, she lent it to me, so I'm reading that right now. But I would just love to hear, I'll have to go back and listen to the podcast, the writing process.
I know. It's so wild.
I mean, really, you really have to be on the same page.
Completely. Yeah. And I think that's why those collaborations, especially an editor already knows how somebody works, and so they know if they're, if it's going to go well together. But yeah, and those 2 with Christina Lauren, if I remember correctly, they started out by writing what they call fan fiction of, it's they're really amazing. They're obsessed with BTS. They have all of this stuff in common. They're just really funny. So they started with this geeky, people write basically their own comic books about these characters that they like. And so they were sort of exploring different things to do together. And but they were so, I mean, it reinforced how fun it can be to work with a partner if you really have that foundation of friendship and support.
Well, I can't imagine how difficult it would be to write a book. Would you ever consider writing a book?
I mean, I dream of doing it, and that's why I love to talk to authors and ask them, what their advice is for anybody who thinks that they maybe could, but it just seems so overwhelming and daunting. And also, when you really love books and you put them on a pedestal and you think, well, I could write one, but I know it'll be crap, so what's the point?
No, that's exactly how I feel. It would be a goal and a dream, to be an author.
Yeah.
But it's just, it would just be so much work.
Yeah.
And we're used to working in news where we're telling other people's stories.
Right.
I'm I don't know how it will come.
Right. So. But I will say, through the course of the podcast, a lot of authors I've spoken to on this podcast have started in journalism.
Oh.
And they were writing, and they said just the fact that you're used to writing allows you to sit down and be more adept at figuring out a new form of writing. And at the very least, you're used to churning stuff out. So even if it's pages that you're going to rip up and throw away and it's all, trial and error, you're at least used to kind of maybe setting a deadline for yourself and putting something down.
Deadlines we can do.
Deadlines, yes, exactly.
So there's hope for us.
Yeah, it's just you did a long deadline to fill a whole book up. Whitney, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you about books today. Thank you so much for sharing your list with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Anytime.
And Whitney, where do we find all your social medias? Give out your plug. And if you're not looking, by the way, and if you're not in Arizona, you don't know Whitney, you must watch the YouTube of this and you can look her up because she's the epitome of gorgeous, glamorous girl who's also carrying a book. So it's a dream.
You're too kind. Thank you. Just at Whitney Clark TV is like where I am the most. Social media accounts. I think Instagram is probably my favorite. I know you have a book club Instagram as well. So that tends to be where I post most of my things.
All right, Whitney, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for listening. We are thankful for the time that you spent here. Happy Thanksgiving and best of luck as we move into the holidays. Happy reading. Thanks for listening to Olivia's Book Club, the podcast. I'm your host, Olivia Fierro. Our producer is Margaret Stewart. You can send us an email with your thoughts or your book recommendations. Olivia's Book Club at azfamily.com is the address. And you can check out Olivia's Book Club on Facebook or find us on Instagram. Hello, Bookstagrammers, at olivias.bookclub. And Margaret is at Overbooked and Overdue. Make sure to rate and subscribe to this podcast and tell your friends. You can find us on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Amazon Music.
This is Olivia's Book Club, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.